long before the pyramids of Egypt, before the Roman Empire, before almost everything we call civilization today, there was a land between two wild rivers. In that land, humans built something the world had never seen before. The first true cities. They invented writing, created complex societies, and changed the course of human history. But thousands of years later, one question still remains. Who were the people that started it all? To understand the beginning of civilization, we need to travel back nearly 6,000 years, to a region known today as Mesopotamia, a name that simply means the land between rivers. Those rivers were the Tigris and the Euphrates. They flowed through a vast flat landscape that could be both generous and dangerous. Every year the rivers flooded, sometimes gently, sometimes violently. Entire villages could be washed away. But when the waters pulled back, they left behind something incredibly valuable. Fertile soil, so fertile that crops could grow in huge quantities. And that changed everything. For thousands of years humans had lived in small farming villages. But here, something different started to happen. The villages kept growing. More houses appeared. More people arrived. Trade began. Workshops appeared. Markets formed. And slowly, those villages transformed into something entirely new. Cities. Among them, one city became legendary. Uruk. Around 3000 BCE, Uruk was already home to tens of thousands of people. At a time when most humans still lived in tiny settlements, Uruk looked like an entirely different world. Tall walls surrounded the city. Inside were busy streets, crowded markets, and massive temples rising above the skyline. For the first time in history, humans were living together in large organized societies. And the people behind this transformation were known as the Sumerians. Life inside a Sumerian city was busy and structured. Outside the walls, farmers worked fields of barley and wheat. Water from the rivers was directed through long irrigation canals. These canals were carefully engineered systems that carried water deep into farmland. Without them, the crops would die. Inside the city, life was very different. Some people shaped clay into pottery. Others crafted tools and weapons from metal. Merchants traded goods with distant regions. Priests conducted rituals in temples. Soldiers protected the city. For the first time, society had become complex. Not everyone was a farmer anymore. People had specialized roles. And that was one of the key signs that civilization had truly begun. But in every Sumerian city, one building stood above everything else. A massive step structure called a ziggurat. These enormous temples towered over the city like artificial mountains. They were built from millions of mud bricks, layer upon layer, higher and higher. To the Sumerians, these temples were sacred, because they believed their world was controlled by powerful gods. Gods of the sky, gods of storms, gods of rivers, gods of the earth. Every city believed it was protected by its own divine power. Priests performed rituals inside the temples daily. Offerings were made. Prayers were spoken. Because in the Sumerian world, keeping the gods satisfied was believed to be essential for survival. As the cities grew larger, another challenge appeared. Managing thousands of people was not easy. Grain had to be stored, animals counted, trade goods tracked, temple offerings recorded. At first this information was kept in simple ways. But eventually the Sumerians created something that would change human history forever. They invented writing. Instead of paper, the Sumerians used clay tablets. While the clay was still soft, scribes pressed symbols into it using a reed stylus. These wedge-shaped symbols formed a writing system known today as cuneiform. At first it recorded simple things. How much grain was stored, how many animals were traded. But soon writing became something far more powerful. It began capturing stories, myths, history. One of the earliest surviving works of literature ever discovered, the Epic of Gilgamesh, comes from these very tablets. Because of these records, the voices of people who lived thousands of years ago can still be heard today. The Sumerians were also responsible for some remarkable inventions. They developed the wheel. They built sailboats. They created complex mathematics based on the number 60. That system still shapes our lives today. It's the reason we measure time using 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour. Ideas that began in Sumer thousands of years ago are still part of everyday life. But the Sumerian world was not peaceful. Sumer was not one kingdom. Instead, it was made up of many independent city-states. Each city had its own ruler, its own army, its own ambitions. Competition for land, water, and power often turned into war. City fought city. Walls were strengthened. Armies marched. For centuries, the balance of power shifted across the region, until eventually new forces began rising from outside Sumer. Over time, the dominance of the Sumerian cities began to fade. New empires emerged, and the political power of Sumer slowly disappeared. But their civilization did not simply vanish. They left behind something extraordinary. Buried beneath ancient ruins were thousands of clay tablets, royal tombs, strange artifacts, and temples filled with mysterious symbols. These discoveries revealed something unexpected, because while the Sumerians created the foundations of civilization, their beliefs about gods, death, and the afterlife were far darker than most people realize. And some of the discoveries inside Sumerian tombs have puzzled historians for decades. The story of how the first civilization lived is fascinating, but the story of what they believed and what happened to them is even more mysterious.